Hello, I'm Olivia,
And I'm Mercedes.
And Tyler.
and today we're talking about Manuel de la Torre's mural in Lincoln High School, painted around the 1930s. And we're discussing just generally what the mural's about and also the relevancy of it today and alongside with the New Deal era programs.
All right, great. Yeah, should we talk about who he was as a person first from what we found on that creator log?
Sure, yeah,
That
go
one?
ahead.
Yeah, the from the creator record. How he was born in 1918 and he was a sergeant during World War II in the Engineer Corps. What do you guys think about his history and past?
I think him being a veteran, also him being, Mexican American, definitely plays into how his work and like what details he included in it. You can kind of see it on the board, but a lot of the details and iconography in the mural is relevant to Chicano history and just generally the history of East LA as well, which I think is very relevant to the area and like him himself as a person.
100%.
Yeah, past, present, everything influences someone's art. So his past must have influenced how he viewed things and how he's expressing himself. And the mural's how he chose to express himself. And we can see that by looking at it. And it's a long mural, and there's like so many things happening at once. And it's just, we see what he's trying to tell us.
100%. I think, I think it just shows how, you can see so much of his past. And then, that was very hard for us to find. But then also it's tough to see his career as an artist. So it's kind of these two stages of his life, both being very hard to, uncover. And I think him being a veteran, it's just a story of that, for kind of forgotten contributions to first the country and then the Chicano community in Los Angeles. So, yeah, I'm down to go in deeper and talk about, his contributions to LA. What do you guys think about the WPA?
The WPA, being a New Deal program, was a way for artists to find work during the era. And sorry. The mural is a part of the WPA program, which is a New Deal era program to help artists. It was a part of the what was it called?
It was included in the Federal Art Project.
Federal Art Project, yeah. And to talk about a little bit why Del Toro doesn't really have a lot of documentation surviving today and why so little information is out there about him and his legacy. The WPA itself didn't have a lot of documentation that survived or that was even created in the first place. The program, being a part of the New Deal, was kind of disjointed in a very chaotic era, which made finding information about him and other artists alike very hard, which today is only more of an issue than it was in the 60s when they were kind of compiling some of this information that was available on the WPA.
Yeah, definitely. I think that article sounds great. Says a lot of great things about the archives of American art and how they felt like, it was important to try to uncover a lot of that, but it just couldn't, whether it was because the projects getting cut short or just the whole situation in Washington during this time just really making it hard. It's not like today where information is so accessible on everybody.
Just a quick search and everything's at your hands. You can see everything.
There was an example in one of the articles talking about how it was this archive that had some WPA documentation, and it had burnt down like maybe a decade after the 1930s. So a lot of what was like accumulated about artists like Del Toro just is lost to time or through accidents like fires, which made further documentation really hard.
That's interesting.
To pivot away from talking about the New Deal as like a program and talking more about the murals themselves, I want to talk about this style that most of the murals that were part of the WPA programs were in, which is called American Scene. American Scene is kind of stylized by having optimism and an emphasis on work, fixing the nation through hard work and, American ingenuity. To quote, it represents the spiritual strength of the nation, its people, and their work. American scene comes in about two subgroups, social realists and regionalists. Social realists were, they used public art to critique the system and to kind of depict more of the harsh reality of Depression America. Typically, it was more in urban big cities, kind of like New York or more East Coast as well. On the other hand, there's regionalists, which is a lot more light in tone. Usually kind of focuses more on the local qualities of the area, particularly in rural areas, and it was the dominant style in California murals. And Del Toro's mural itself would be categorized as a regionalist because it plays into local history in East LA, as well as Chicano history and Mexican American history, due to the fact that has a lot of its imagery is reminiscent of that. So kind of showing how Del Toro compares to other muralists of the time and from the WPA programs.
Well, I think that was beautiful. That was a beautiful explanation of, why a lot of these communities, invested so much, with public buildings. And it was really just about making the culture and the art form murals available for, not just, high status corporations and whatnot. It was really just making it for, street level visibility. I think that's, a great contribution. That's a great investment by the WPA to reinvest into these communities.
Yeah, and kind of a way to bring optimism back in a time that was really needed for communities, and to have it be specific to the area is it feels special. It feels like it's,
100%. It built the culture a lot. It contributed to a lot of, when we think about these different decades and eras.
I mean, I'm just gonna bring this up, in Escondido that I always drive by this one mural, and it's in purple and black, and it's all written in Chicano letters. So for the mural for Manuel de la Torre, he it's for the community to look at. And so every time when someone sees a mural in their own community, this is what our community is about. So as you said, as a WPA to invest in this, it's cool. This is what ties the community together.
Yeah. Great personal example.
To talk about the mural itself, and we've kind of touched upon some of the iconography and symbolism used within the mural. A lot of it is reminiscent to Hispanic and Chicano culture itself. And if any of you want to start us off?
I'll start off. So I just want to point out the friar in the center of the whole mural. He's holding up what I think is a Bible on his left hand, and holding up a cross in his right hand, up in the air. Religion takes a huge role in Latin culture, because you would just see churches all around, and so for him to put in the center, it just shows how he sees religion in the center of his artwork.
Yeah, great.
And that's a great. Yeah, I think you marked it on that. The only thing I noticed, firsthand, is just how everyone's actively engaging. There's no spectators in this. Everyone has a role. Everyone has something in their hand, or they have a role to fill in. But really, I just think it's more of a take on individual contributions.
Yeah.
You can see all these roles, but yet, I couldn't tell you. I could tell you their titles, but I couldn't tell you. Obviously their names. I don't know. I think it's a reflection of, Toro, and kind of how times last. We know he was an artist, but yet most people, they don't know his name. They don't know his other contributions in his life. So really, I just think it, it kind of reflects how his life played out through all this era.
Just one of many artists of the era that kind of wasn't remembered as much currently, and also the whole scene itself, it's all these people working as a community, right? They're all working to the same goal, or appear to be at least, and they're all doing various things. You know, we have shepherd, we have agriculture, we have next to the friar, we have a conquistador, and then a what looks to be maybe an Aztec or some indigenous person, kind of showing all the different facets of Latin culture, right? The Spanish influence and the colonial impact that still lingers today, as well as indigenous roots and, you know, current time, you know. So it really just shows the full picture of, not the full picture, but a good segment of the culture, at least trying to represent it in some way.
Can I ask you guys to personally, you know, as, you know, how do you feel about, you know, like conquistador and, you know, Aztec, you know, influence in the Mexican culture? How do you guys feel about that?
I think it's important to mention, you know, because it's like, it's not a complete story if you don't mention both, right? And that's all I have. Sorry.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
I mean, where there's a beginning, there's always somewhere where it began. So the conquistador and indigenous people, that was the very beginning of how Latin culture was influenced by. So many things happened, and yeah.
Okay, yeah. Great take. All right, yeah, great. And then, yeah, if we just want to talk about recently that New York Times article, well, yeah, 2000s at least, how it discussed the 70-year retrospective activity that the Los Angeles Conservancy hosted, and they incorporated a couple of Torres's paintings, actually. So what do you guys think? Do you think that still means that his work is still able to last all this time, 70 years later? Or do you think, what's your guys' opinion on it?
I think it shows that even if these murals are older and from kind of a bygone era, if you want to say that, people still find value in conserving them, as well as their impact they have today. This mural itself is in a high school that it's still publicly visible, right? Students every year walk down these hallways and see these murals and see representation of their culture and also the past of the culture as well, since it's an older mural. I think the conservation of some of his works shows that even, you know, almost 70, 80 years later, his work still has meaning for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that one, where, like, for something so old to be inside of a high school and there's new generations of students walking down the hallway, I think it's just, like, another reminder, like, hey, culture never dies. It just doesn't just disappear. So, like, for students to look at it when they're walking down the hallways, like, okay, like, just a little reminder, like, this still exists and this can still have an impact. Yeah.
100%.
For sure.
I just think it's great that you mentioned students, Mercedes. You know, I think it's, you know, I was looking at the one article by Monica Rodriguez talking about, you know, the inspiration of Lincoln High School students, and especially, like, even way back then, like, we saw there was definitely a number of students who would go on to work with the WPA and create other murals, and this was after, you know, Torres's time. So I just think, you know, it's a great, you know, he paved the road for a lot of that inspiration. What do you guys think?
I mean, what's it called? He inspired most. So for him to pave the road for everyone, like, everyone looked up to him, like, okay, like, if he can do it, then we can do it too. So then they just created their own artwork, and that's where it just keeps working up. Many artworks after artworks because of the one inspiration that he set.
And, like, to talk about the high school itself, I don't think it should be ignored that this high school is pretty historic. Established in 1878, it's one of the oldest public high schools in the Los Angeles area, in Lincoln Heights. And it actually got rebuilt after it was opened in 1933 following the Long Beach earthquake. And when it was rebuilt as a New Deal project. So a lot of it's Art Deco, and it kind of, the whole building itself reflects that PWA style, and as we mentioned, it features many, not just Del Toro's work, but other muralists of the time as well and their artwork. So the whole high school itself is kind of this product of the New Deal and projects like that, which I'm sure only further inspired students and artists alike.
Great.
Yeah.
Percent. All right.
And to talk about, the mural itself, or murals in general, rather, I think it's really important to have murals representative of any culture, especially in public spaces like high schools or in city walkways or downtowns or wherever there is space for it. I think it's a really good utilization of public space, to have, cultural snapshots around the city and to represent the community that inhibits that city, is a really positive aspect of public space and murals itself, which I think is just a really lovely thing to have.
Yeah, I mean,
That's sweet.
there's a little city, not too little, I would say, but it's not murals, but they're like little artworks. They've been living around Mira Mesa
Mhm.
for many years. So like every time there's like some open blank small little structure, they just paint over it, and no one like erases it or anything, because
Mhm.
this is what the community looks at. Like, oh, like this is how Mira Mesa is. They
Yeah.
just have their little artworks all around. And I think it was cool.
That's sweet. That's sweet that that's preserved.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Art by the community for the community,
Yeah.
and being preserved by the city, because it's very easy. They could have just like, oh, that's graffiti, or that's not allowed or wasn't approved. But no, to be like, this is art, that represents Mira Mesa particularly. Let's preserve it. That's special.
There was one for, it's like a Martin Luther King one.
Mm-hmm.
It says, "I have a dream," and that was like, I would say in the early 2010s when
Oh,
they
yeah?
painted it. It's still there.
Still, hey.
So it's like, I thought it was cool. Like, they're not covering it up,
Mhm.
and then they're still painting more around the city.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I think that's awesome today with the technology and obviously AI and AI art become more increasingly, exponentially. So I think it's really good to preserve, the human spirit in art
Human-made,
like
yeah.
that. So I think those were great comments by you two.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome examples.
Yeah. And that about does it. Thank you all for listening. Once again, I'm Olivia.
And I'm Mercedes.
Tyler, yeah, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
Bye.